Good afternoon. I'm Bernard Green, and this is Brookline's annual Martin Luther King Jr. celebration event, which is held every year here at the beautiful Coolidge Corner Theater. I'm chair of the Brookline Select Board and chair of the committee that organizes this program. The annual celebration honors Martin Luther King and the life and the still relevant social justice issues for which he fought and ultimately gave his life for 58 years ago. We have in our audience other members of the town, and I see select board members, John Van Scoyac, David Perlman, and Michael Rubenstein, and Tommy Botola, our state representative, is also here. Did someone say someone else I missed? Oh, school committee. Okay, raise your hand. Okay. Sun's in my eyes, I can't really see. Oh, okay, Suzanne Federspiel and Bob Reintraub. Using the privilege of being the MC, I'm going to start with a quote from a Ford auto worker in Michigan, T.J. Sabula. Sabula called Donald Trump out as a pedophile protector during a political event at the Ford auto plant where he worked. Trump responded with an obscene gesture and an outburst of profanity. Sabula later said in an interview, and this is very interesting, "I don't feel as though fate looks upon you often, and when it does, you better be ready to seize the opportunity. Fate is looking upon us today, and we must be ready to seize the opportunity to protect all that we hold dear. We must respond like Sabula, like Martin Luther King Jr., and the many thousands of ordinary people who over the years stepped up in great danger and seized the moment and marched, organized, and educated." Well, you're applauding them, not me. Like the response to the countless atrocities suffered by civil rights activists decades ago, the killing of Renee Nicole Good has caused people to see fate looking down upon them, and millions have seized the opportunity to mobilize against the current atrocities dictated by and I'm sorry, but in my opinion, a sick and ignorant president. Atrocities that will be visited upon anyone stepping out of their place and exercising their sacred right to free speech, to peaceful assembly, to petition their government for a redress of grievances, whether it's the federal government or your local Brookline Select Board, or to attend a lecture on Martin Luther King Jr. The civil rights movement confronted similar attacks decades ago, and like today, they were outgunned and assaulted with lies and fear and acts of terrorism. But the civil rights movement prevailed because they had a more powerful weapon than their antagonists. That weapon was their commitment to mass mobilization of people to confront brutal power with disciplined, purposeful, and peaceful nonviolent action. Today, the threat is different, but the similarities are striking. The very legitimacy of civil rights and non-discrimination is being undermined and attacked with assaults on DEI and on the mechanisms that have been in place for decades to prevent discrimination and to rectify its effects. We see the return of casual racist language at the highest levels of our federal government, and as overtly racial characterizations of people of color generally, whether Americans, immigrants from Somalia, Haiti, Mexico, or elsewhere, or the black people of proud African nations. We're in a dark, dark period in America. But it is a time when we need to stand tall and be as courageous as those uneducated, poor Mississippi Delta sharecroppers who stood up and marched to register to vote in the face of real and imminent threats of violence. Those sharecroppers included Fannie Lou Hamer, who we will hear singing "Go Tell It on the Mountain" at the end of this program. If they can do it, we sure can. Those who are trying to turn back the clock know that education and knowledge of history are threats to their goals. Therefore, we must learn the lessons of the Civil Rights Movement because those lessons are relevant today. And programs like today's program on Dr. King and the power of education and the national recognition of his birthday will help reinforce the historical knowledge that we need to prevail in the face of today's challenges. Now, let me lay out a roadmap for today's program. Our keynote speaker, Noliwe Rooks, will focus on how King and the power of education was used to mobilize people against segregation and later the war in Vietnam and poverty in America. Today's program will present new insights into the thinking and strategizing of Martin Luther King Jr. and will offer a deeper understanding of the complexities of the struggle for civil and human rights. I'd like to use this time, or at this point in my comments, to express my real condolences to the people of Brown, or the students and faculty of Brown University, where Dr. Rooks is a professor, who are still hurting from the killing of students and the terrorizing of the entire community of Brown, and the unfortunate fact that Brookline and Brown are connected by this tragedy, by the way that we are linked. And we should think about that. It's a scary situation, but we can prevail, and we will prevail even on those so-called smaller acts of violence and terrorism that we're subjected to. And it may not seem that way, but they are connected. The idea that violence is an acceptable way of operating politically in this country is the cause of not only what's happening in places like Minnesota and the mass shootings we hear about almost monthly, but also killings like we suffered here in Brookline and at Brown University. Okay. So let's move on. First, we're going to enjoy in our program some poetry, which was one of the many communication tools used by Martin Luther King in his organizing. Brookline's Poet Laureate, Allison Adair, will deliver "Lift Every Voice and Sing" as a poem, as it originally was written. The poem was written by the great poet, educator, lawyer, and the first Black lawyer to be admitted to the bar in Florida after Reconstruction, and leader of the NAACP, a U.S. diplomat, and literary giant of the Harlem Renaissance, James Weldon Johnson. For Lincoln Day, he wrote the poem for Lincoln Day festivities at the Stanton School in Jacksonville, Florida, where he was the principal in 1899. It was only later, in 1900, that this poem was put to music by his brother, John Rosamond Johnson. "Lift Every Voice and Sing" was labeled the Negro National Anthem by the NAACP in 1919, and is often sung at gatherings of Black people and civil rights-related events. Following Allison Adair, the Brookline Poet Laureate, we will have the Massachusetts Poet Laureate, Regie Gibson. The first the Commonwealth of Massachusetts' first Poet Laureate. Regie Gibson will present a special performance crafted for today's event in his inimitable style. So first, Allison Adair, and immediately following, we will hear from Regie Gibson. Thank you.
It is like looking into the sun, huh? Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm honored to have been invited to stand in community with you all and to read and introduce James Weldon Johnson's poem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, a poem that, to its author, might have felt like a small act, but proved to take on a life of its own, now celebrated by so many. As an educator, but even more as a poet, I'm interested in the moment of creation that guided Johnson, that spark, and what insights it might hold for us. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about rhyme. Rhyme might seem like mere ornament, but it offers such pleasure, such relief to a reader. Something begun is completed. Rhyme offers pairing, resolution, a cadence, a confidence in some semblance of order. Listen, if you would, to the music of the poem's first stanza. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies, let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. If you refer to the poem in your program, it's just inside the back cover, you'll notice right away the pattern of end rhymes. What joy we begin with in the poem's opening 2 lines, sing and ring, a simple rhyme with notes of ease. But notice what happens next. We arrive at the more complex liberty. And what follows isn't a rhyme, but a diversion, rise paired with skies. What happened to liberty? Johnson makes us wait. It's only after the intensification and reassertion of the poem's initial instructions, let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies, that we get any relief, thanks to the rolling sea. That was a close one. We almost lost sight of what we'd hoped for. Finding it required patience and faith. And as our reward for that patience and faith, the rhyme greets us with abundance. First, 2 entire lines that are almost identical and that end in extended rhymes, has taught us and has brought us. And then the finale, what we'd hoped for, what was begun will be won. As the poem progresses, this struggle is enacted again and again. And isn't that the truth? This struggle enacted again and again. Johnson's form tells us that he knew something of how tiring patience and faith were. He knew what they require, especially when you lose sight of that initial rhyme, waiting for the resolution, to keep going, to establish new connections, to find or create order anywhere we can. But notice, as I'll now read in its entirety, Johnson's amazing musical poem, how his rhyme offers us a blueprint for how to hope, how to gather and work and gather ourselves again. Notice his assurance that the abundance will come, God willing, even more than what we'd hoped for. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed? We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. Please join me in welcoming our Massachusetts Poet Laureate, Regie Gibson.
Thank you, Allison. Allison and I, we go way back, and I always like to point out that I'm the Poet Laureate of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because that's a very important word, Commonwealth, right? A group convened together for the betterment of one another, that we share, that we give back, that we don't just take. And there have been those who've given back to the Commonwealth. And I've tried to sing of those folk with something called Massachusetts, a Song of Itself, bringing in these historical personages who have asked us to be better than what we were at the time. And life in this Commonwealth was changed by those who would not keep quiet, they were changed especially by Massachusetts women who would not accept that their sex should consign them to silence, who were resilient in insisting that we live up to our highest ideals that freedom sparked. And that freedom was sparked in this country not just by the deeds of great men, but also by women as well, women like Lucy Stone. And I want to start by giving a quote that Lucy Stone's mother gave when Lucy was born. She said, "Oh dear, I am sorry it is a girl. A woman's life is so hard." Lucy, when your mother said those words, on that warm August day you were born, did she know you were preparing to fight? Preparing you to be a strong-willed daughter in a home where there was only one will, your father's. Your father who kept every penny you and your mother made, yet ardently believed that no one should be enslaved. No, yes, here in the 21st century, we still have a sense of irony. Your entire family, staunch abolitionists, and you too, the desire for all people to be free burned deeply in you. So when abolitionist feminist Abby Kelly fanned you, she found you, she knew in your soul what you needed to do. So at 16, you decided you'd pursue higher learning, further educate your mind, but unlike he did for your brothers, your father would not give you a dime. And we can see that sometimes happens in our culture, right? Someone who might be okay on one thing, they're not quite okay on another, right? There's this dualism sometimes, and this split between them understanding so totally how this should be right and what's going on with that over here. I'll invoke my father-in-law right now, who he understood why the Irish had to get away from the British during the potato famine, but cannot seem to understand why other people need to cross deserts to get here running from something else. He has a total understanding of one thing and refuses to have an understanding of something else. So, you taught and you worked and you saved to put yourself through Oberlin, the only college in the United States to let women and blacks in. And still, you taught and you worked and you saved until eventually you became the first woman in Massachusetts history to earn a college degree. And as you employed that brilliant mind of yours toward bringing an end to slavery, you also reflected heavily on the rights denied women. So you joined your sister suffragists who were sick and tired of being sick and tired, like Fannie Lou Hamer, who we'll hear from next, and from the women's movement. From there, the women's movement grew. And I've always wondered, Lucy, what makes women like you? Now, part of what I'm going to read is also going to be in the faux voice of my brother, who is a member of a particular Christian sect that tells him that women are lesser. He has accepted sexism and chauvinism as a way to live and be in the world. And let's say we do not have great conversations. Crappy people All of them have family. Some of them are in mine, and some are in yours. Who are these Lucy Stone women? Women who refuse to be owned by father or husband. Women who have the gumption to want to own their own lives. Who are these hard-working, gifted-minded women, these morning stars that shine when told to cloak and cover their brightness? Who are these abolitionists, feminists, bringers of light women? These ain't going gently into that good night women. These ain't going gently into that good night women. Who are these Lucy Stone-type women? Who are these women who want the world made right? Women who refuse to believe their status is God-ordained shame, who get hymnal books thrown at their faces because they don't know that their place is not here. It's at home, not trying to better the human race and move us toward a better space. Some men, brother, find it hard to love them, but Massachusetts needs more of them. Who are these women who want to be more than the appendage of society, more than the relic of somebody, who feel the need to speak the truth fearlessly, hoping to weigh the scales of justice and equality? Who are these Lucy Stone women, these women who think they can protest what men know to be best, women who think they can wear pants, who won't submit their last name to a man's, who won't listen to their daddies and stay uneducated, who waste their time in their mind's cultivation and refuse to marry well and let their bellies swell with children like they're supposed to? Who are these women who refuse to say less, be paid less, who believe they should have the right to life, liberty, and the what? Pursuit of happiness? Who are these women? Well, some men find it hard to love them, brother, but Massachusetts needs more of them, brother. Needs more of these Lucy Stone women who won't accept repeated injuries and usurpations, daily degradations, who want to exercise inalienable rights across this nation. Who are these women that are not okay with having no voice, not okay with having no choice, or not okay with accepting the supremacy of a man and giving all power into his hands? Women, who are these Lucy Stone women of confidence and self-respect who refuse to be made abject and object? Who are these Lucy Stone women who refuse to blush or hush or shush when commanded to, who bite through ropes with bared teeth and spit venom and medicine? Who are these women, these wolf-running women, these tide-turning women, humanity-affirming, mind-churning, ever-learning, respect-earning women, history-making, role-breaking, bridge-building, unyielding, history-page-turning, tea-burning women with light they refuse to hide? Who are these Lucy Stone women who have the ovaries to hold their heads and their fists up high? Some men find it hard to love them, but Massachusetts needs more of them. Some men find it hard to love them, but Massachusetts needs more of them. And to think about that, because one of the things, Ibram X. Kendi was here some years ago speaking right here on this stage, and one of the things he was talking about with the rollback of anti-racist education, right, and the rollback of DEI and the rollback of looking at history, is that a lot of white people have been denied knowing about people like Lucy Stone, right? Have been denied knowing about white folks who actually did the right thing, and so our children grow up without those heroes. Right? They think it only happened in the 60s that we had started fighting for stuff, but not knowing that other people had been committing themselves to this. And so it's denied, this is what Ibram X. Kendi was saying, it's denied a generation of white youth, heroes that they can look up to. And that's a big crime. And we do need more of these Lucy Stone type women, more revolutionary people of resilience and backbone, people who challenge each prejudice and held belief, and hold out about what anyone else should be. And William Cooper Nell was chief among them. Nell was a free African American who was not only key in anti-slavery legislation, but was a leading figure in school desegregation, which, because of him and others, Massachusetts outlawed, believe it or not, in 1855. Nell was dogged and determined, dodging slave catchers and trash thrown in him in the streets by both blacks and whites who did not want to integrate the schools. So he caught it from both sides. But he kept on fighting for a better Massachusetts and a better world until his death. Letter to William Cooper Nell. Dear William, I speak to you from this space across time, but in the same place wherein you moved and still move. This Massachusetts you loved and lifted, black men and women of your era have always impressed me. I often find myself wondering how you held yourselves together in a world bent on ripping you apart. How you sustained a brilliance of mind, humanity, and hope in a place where darkness thrived. There must have been some light burning in you there in that candlelit room on Smith Court where you penned your speech that invoked Crispus Attucks' spirit, saying, "Americans, while from this eminent scene of luxury and fertility, of flourishing commerce, and the abodes of social happiness, forget not those who, by their exertions, have secured to you these blessings." William, when did you sense we could be better? Was it in working with Garrison and Douglas that you resolved to deepen in the heart and conscience of this nation the sense of justice that would manifest itself in deeds? I imagine, even as a boy, your thoughts were ahead of you, that even though denied your educational due, you saw visions of a liberated, desegregated future's mirage like shimmering and moved toward it in slow steps. And with each of those steps, I imagine you gathering stone after stone after stone that you would later use to help build a bridge across the wide white expanse between black and freedom, between America and the promise of hard-won democracy and liberty. Well, we today still take that journey, William. And in doing so, we come across footprints of those like you, those who, though tired, did not tire, though desperate, did not despair, though disappointed, did not quit, but kept on, keeping on, kept making a way out of no way, kept penning the next word, kept teaching the next child, kept educating the next mind, kept their eyes on the prize, and held on. Thank you. Thank you. And lastly, with keeping the eyes on the prize, that's one of the things we associate most with King, about the idea of looking at the prize forward, but also, which may be the horizon, but also looking at what's right in front of you, the work that you have to do. And me growing up part of my life on a farm, a cotton farm, actually, where my ancestors used to actually work and then later bought, is that we're always talking about looking toward the horizon, right, where you have to go, how far you have to sow, but you got to think about the row that's right here in front of you. And this is the soil you have to dig down deep into, and we have to think about that in these times we find ourselves. What is the thing that's right in front of us that we need to do something about? This is my last epistolary. This is an open letter to Dr. King. Dr. King. It's us again. Come once more to reflect on your legacy. We do this because, though you were imperfect, you represented some of the best we could be. We come because, like you, we love this country dearly. But in this time of heavy history, we see so many of us yelling loudest and proudest of loving America seem to hate and distrust so many Americans. Dr. King, we need to hear you speak again of love. That love you called a marvelous new militancy. Tell us again of how it will overtake this land. Tell us again of what beloved community demands, because we need it now. Need it to petition, to command, to take us over now. Dr. King, we sometimes find ourselves floundering on the shores of democratic disbelief, find ourselves constantly companioned by a civic grief, that debilitating thief that conspires to steal and still both our will and our fire. So in desperate desire, we vigil here in your name, to find the faith to fan fading ember back into flame, to reflect, remember, resurrect, and render the spirit of your words into action, and hope they will guide us as we move along this rocky road to the promised land. Dr. King, we need so much of that optimistic music that played in you to play more loudly in our ears, to block out the insistent screeching we hear from the squawking hawks who intend to compose the jangling discord of ethnic and religious hatreds you dreamed would end. Dr. King, we need to be reminded that the best of what you were did not die with you, but resonates within us now. Need for it to continue strengthening us to sow seeds of justice in this hardening civic soil. Somehow we need to be reminded that right temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. Need to be reminded that human salvation truly does lie in the hands of the creatively maladjusted. And just when we feel like giving in, as if the worst in us is poised to always win, Dr. King, this time comes around again, and we all have the chance to breathe again, receive a bit of reprieve again, then slowly begin to believe again. Believe in what you taught us, that we must never allow ourselves to become satisfied with unattained goals. We must meet physical force with the overwhelming force of the soul, that though we've come on different ships, well, now we're all in the same boat. And that together we can hew out of a mountain of despair a stone of hope. Dr. King, we have pilgrimed here today, walked on these torn and tired feet made of clay to both salve and stitch our wounds, and yes, through our thirst, dry throats, and blood-stained lips, sing our scars. For even in the midst of this present American darkness, we continue looking northward and upward and following that drinking gourd made of stars. So yes, today, in spite of everything, we sing. We sing, Dr. King, like the instruments of freedom and justice you've taught us to believe we are.
Thank you, Allison and Reggie, for an uplifting presentation, something for us to think about over many days, and hopefully guide us in our actions going forward to act as Dr. King would want us to act when we face similar challenges as he did. This afternoon's celebration continues in the tradition of prior year's programs, presenting speakers that educate the audience on pressing current issues facing Brookline, the nation, and the world. Performing that task this year will be Noliwe Rooks, who will speak on the topic, Dr. King and the Power of Education, a Blueprint for Freedom. Please don't listen to Dr. Rooks passively, although I'm sure you're comfortable in your seats. Be active in terms of thinking about how her message can help us make sense of today's world and actually do something about it to make it better. So with that, Dr. Noliwe Rooks.
How are y'all? I have to tell you, this is the first time. Oh, well, hold on. Let me have home training here. I want to thank y'all for inviting me. Getting to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King at any day, at any point, is certainly an honor. But it's my first King Day celebration here in Brookline. The people who pulled it together. The committee who approached me helped me think about what to say, how to say it, who I was talking about. They represent you well. Let me just say that like that. They represent you well. Well, they told me I had 25 minutes, so I'm not going to be extemporaneous. I'm going to read what I have so I can have the message. You can actually hear it. But I wanted to talk about King and education today for some reasons that I'll talk to you about when I get to the formal presentation. But I've spent the last 5-7 years working on thinking about my most recent book, which is a book called Integrated: How Schools in America Fail Black Children. What it is a story about my family, fundamentally. It's a story about America, it's a story about Black children, it's a story about resistance and freedom and democracy and citizenship, but at its core, it's an intergenerational story about my family that starts with my grandparents, who were both educators in the segregated South in Clearwater, Florida. They built a school and loved them some Black children that they did not claim as their own. From them, though, they fought hard for integration. My grandfather was a member of the NAACP, he's the president of NAACP in Clearwater, Florida. My grandmother was a reading teacher. I had a fairly easy path through school because in the 3rd grade I was selected for the gifted and talented program. All that meant was they gave me a book to read. That was it. That was the test. They gave me a book to read out loud to them. They wanted to hear how I pronounced the words. I was in the 3rd grade by then. But I've been an active, talkative child. My grandmother was the reading teacher. She had a book in my hand very early. She said it was self-defense more than anything else, the ability to give me something to do with my imagination and my mouth and my mind. For the gifted and talented folks, I showed up as reading far beyond where they thought that I should. And they labeled me some sort of gifted and talented. It wasn't anything but Evelyn Baker Rooks, who had put a book in my hand and taught me to read in the ways that she taught Black children for generations to read. My father, though, was the first in the family, the first in amongst the group in the US, to be tasked with integrating a predominantly white school. He had been educated in schools that his mother and father taught in. He'd been educated in all Black schools. Again, this is Florida in the 90s, born in the 1930s. He went to Howard University the summer Emmett Till was murdered, and did well at Howard. It's a predominantly Black school. Left Howard, went out to California to law school, where for the first time he began to struggle. And as he explained to me what the struggle was, he was the child of educators. He was the child of beloved educators. He had always been a valedictorian. He had always been the top of his class here and there. He struggled when he got to law school, and he told my mother the issue was he had never had teachers who didn't think he was fully human. He had never before had teachers that didn't think he was capable. And he didn't, as that first group of children, didn't know how to handle it. It was hard on him. He developed a drinking problem that he had for most of his life. He couldn't make that change. He couldn't leave what was, where he was valued, where he was beloved, where he was exalted for his intellect, and become the poster child for all that was wrong with Black people, and in some moments, wrong with the United States. Integration was not something that he could survive. He wasn't the only one. We don't tell those stories very often. Then I talk about my history, where I was educated, integrated, first group of students to integrate schools in Clearwater, Florida, in Pinellas County, actually. They bussed us out to the county. In the 5th grade and the 6th grade, my parents split me up for years. Their custody arrangement was I spent 1 year in Clearwater, Florida with my grandparents and my father, and I spent 1 year with my mother out in San Francisco. So my growing up was bi-coastal in those ways. And in Florida, I integrated a school. By the time I got to the 6th grade, I was in there's nothing to call it but a hardcore ghetto school. There were more police than teachers. There was nothing about that experience that was designed to have me succeed. And then my son, being the child of, by then, me, a college professor, who grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, went to integrated, rigorous, prep school type actions. He did well, but it cost him in some ways. He talks about, I gave him a poem by a poet named Paul Laurence Dunbar, who wrote a poem called We Wear the Mask. He talked to me about how he had to wear a mask to navigate the schools that he was in. Great student, outstanding student, well-liked, athlete. He wasn't tragic, but he had to navigate some circumstances. And so the story that I tell in Integrated is not about integration itself. It's about all the ways and reasons that we keep this thing we know works, this thing that we know is a good, this thing that we know benefits everyone if it's allowed to work. It's a story about why haven't we done it as a nation? Why is it so rare to find schools that are joyfully, gleefully integrated? And that's the story about how schools in America fail Black children. It's not integration, it's the rest of us. So and thinking about what I wanted to say to you today, though, I really wanted to talk about how thinking about Dr. King can help us think about education today. The introduction is called Beyond the Monument, and I have a quote that should, yes, okay. The only thing I'm gonna show you is some quotes. You can reflect on those and listen to me talk about them some. If you close your eyes and picture Martin Luther King Jr., you likely see him at a distance, frozen in the amber of 1963. You see him possibly at the great symbolic heights, the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, the pulpits of Montgomery, the Nobel stage in Oslo. We've been taught to remember the very sound of freedom is his voice ringing across the National Mall. We think of him marching, we think of him voting, we think of him praying, but rarely, if ever, does our collective memory place Dr. King in a public school classroom. The absence is telling. For many, King is a monument of the past, a static figure of dreams and mountaintops. But if we want to understand how he intended for us to actually live in the world he fought for, we have to look for his North Star. In the history of the freedom struggle, the North Star was more than a celestial body. It was a navigational necessity. For the enslaved seeking the Underground Railroad, the North Star was the one constant in the sky of shifting clouds. It was the point by which all other directions were judged. It pointed toward freedom. For King, education was that North Star. He understood a truth that we often forget, that while laws can be changed with the stroke of a pen, the sovereignty of the mind must be cultivated. He knew that if we integrated the lunch counter but left the curriculum in the hands of those who did not value the students' humanity, we would only be feeding a body whose mind was still starved. Today, I want to reclaim the classroom as a site of strategy for Dr. King. I'll trace 4 lessons. They are disciplined hope, the heavy price of access, the need to preserve community power, and the way policy design erects walls in cities like Chicago. Together, I think they illustrate King's North Star. Education is the steady guide for democratic life. Lesson 1, disciplined hope, the architect on Allerton Street. In October 1967, only 6 months before his life would be taken, Dr. King stood before a group of Black students at Barrett Junior High in Philadelphia. His talk that day was titled, "What is Your Life's Blueprint?" He told those young people that every building needs a solid foundation and every life follows a plan. But he issued a warning. He said too many people simply inherit blueprints written by someone else, blueprints designed for their failure. He urged those children to draw a plan for their own lives and to start with a belief in their own somebodyness. He wasn't talking about ego. He was talking about a strategic refusal to be invisible. To make that lesson real, he invoked a name woven into the fabric of Brookline, Massachusetts, Roland Hayes. King told those students about Hayes, that he was born in the Red Hills of Georgia to a mother who could not read. Yet he, Hayes, traveled to Europe, studied music, and became fluent in multiple languages. He went on to become the premier tenor of his age. But King wasn't just telling a rags to riches story. He was highlighting the infrastructure of excellence. In the 1920s, when agents refused to book a Black singer, Roland Hayes didn't wait for permission. He rented out Boston Symphony Hall with his own money, wowed the audience, and ensured his place as a figure suitable for an inspirational lecture by Dr. King. He became his life's own architect. This brings us to our first principle, disciplined hope. Optimism is a feeling, but hope is a practice. For Roland Hayes, hope was the discipline of practicing his scales at 58 Allerton Street for hours every day. It was the blueprint of a man who knew that when the world refuses you a stage, you must build your own. In sharing his example, King showed that he viewed classrooms as the rehearsal rooms of democracy. They're where futures are practiced and sovereign minds formed. Lesson 2, outcomes over access, the pressure cooker of Little Rock. Or you could do the next. Yeah. If Roland Hayes shows us the why of education, for Dr. King, Little Rock shows us the cost. We have to remember the era. In 1957, during what were the early days of network television, the nation was glued to their screens. Families sat in their living rooms and watched in grainy black and white as the 101st Airborne escorted 9 teenagers into Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. They were entering those doors to fulfill the tenets of the Brown v. Board of Education decision of 1954, outlawing segregation in public schools. Those images of paratroopers with fixed bayonets ushering them into the school became the first great televised drama of the civil rights struggle. It looked like a definitive victory as they entered Central High to learn. But King knew what the students experienced once the cameras left. After the soldiers had been withdrawn and the national headlines had moved on, during the school year, those 9 teenagers entered what they called a pressure cooker. They were spat on in the hallways. They were pushed down concrete stairs. They had dynamite thrown at them. They were isolated in the cafeteria, eating lunch as an island of sovereign somebodyness in a sea of hostility. A few years later, in 1960s, Dr. King would stand before the women of Spelman College, my alma mater, and give them a rhythmic command that has since become legendary. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. While he hadn't yet spoken those words in 1957, he was watching those 9 children embody that spirit. He also saw how, one after another, they withdrew from the school, some leaving the state of Arkansas altogether due to the death threats they and their families received. When graduation day finally arrived in May of 1958, Ernest Green was the only one of the original 9 to walk across the graduation stage. The school board even tried to erase that hard-won victory. They prohibited his family from cheering. They tried to make the ceremony invisible, hoping to prove that while he might have accessed the school, his achievement didn't make him one of them. But King thought the occasion worthy. He showed up. Dr. King sat in the stands next to Green's mother, quiet, unannounced, an inspirational architect of the moment, a silent witness at the finish line. He didn't come for the riot. He came for the outcome. This is our second principle, outcomes over access. King understood that true justice was not just getting through a schoolhouse door, it was walking across the graduation stage. Lesson 3, could do the next one. Power and preservation, a warning from Georgia. This leads us to a harder truth. In the late 1950s, at the height of the Southern struggles over school integration, exemplified by Little Rock and elsewhere, King issued a blunt, prophetic warning to Black educators in Georgia. He said, "I'm not one to support integrating ourselves out of power." As the desegregation of public schools unfolded, a disturbing pattern emerged. Integration often ran one way. Physical barriers came down, but decision-making and institutional voice did not travel with students. Neighborhood schools, the civic anchors that held memory and mentorship, were closed or consolidated. Black principals were reassigned to subordinate posts or pushed out entirely. Black teachers, the adults who had sustained communities through the long night of segregation, found themselves sidelined from curricula and leadership roles. Black teachers who had supported integration efforts were left behind. King saw this and knew if you absorb a community without protecting its leadership and its practices, you do not integrate. You erase the institutional memory that taught children how to navigate the world with dignity. You strip away the informal networks, the coaches and church partnerships that turned schooling into a site of belonging and civic formation. Power and preservation is, then, our third principle. Integrated schools must preserve and cultivate community authority, not displace it. Preservation is not a refusal of change, it's a requirement for just change. King understood that if we want integration in schools to be a true enlargement of democracy, we must build systems that bring people in and give them the authority to shape what comes next. Next one. Lesson 4, Design Matters, the Wall in Chicago. Finally, we look to King's campaign in Chicago in 1966. King, who did his graduate work in Boston alongside his wife and fellow activist, Coretta Scott King, understood that Northern segregation was more sophisticated than Southern signs. It was built into the very infrastructure of the city. To prove this, he did something radical. He moved his family into a third-floor walk-up in North Lawndale, a neighborhood on Chicago's west side. He didn't just visit, he lived there. He lived in a tenement owned by the Corbetts, a building that was a textbook example of slumlord neglect. He wanted to show that the high rents and crumbling walls weren't accidents. He saw that the schools in North Lawndale, a poor, predominantly Black area of Chicago, were essentially holding cells, designed to prepare children, he said, for the factory or the street. While schools just a few miles away, those educating the wealthy, were designed to educate those children for the boardroom. King worked with a federal official named Francis Keppel, who froze $32 million in federal funding for Chicago schools because they were flagrantly segregated, and the law then prohibited spending taxpayer funds on aggressively segregated schools. It was a moment of peak leverage, a chance to redesign the city itself. But Mayor Richard J. Daley called the White House. He told President Johnson that if the money didn't flow to those segregated schools, political support for Democrats in Chicago, in Illinois, would dry up. Wait, hold on. Money would vanish. Johnson caved. The funds were restored, and Keppel was fired. Chicago's schools remain segregated today. King realized then that liberalism without educational courage is empty. He realized that inequality was not a mistake, it was a choice, protected by the very people who claim to enforce constitutional protections and to expand democratic opportunity. This brings us to our fourth principle, design matters. Justice does not emerge on its own, it must be built. If funding formulas and zoning rules reward segregation, no amount of goodwill will fix it. King understood with painful clarity that justice too long delayed is justice denied. So in closing, because they said 20 minutes and I took them seriously, I want to ask you to be the architects. As you leave here today, I want you to look at your own blueprint. I want you to think about how you can be an architect of hope, the same way that King's life exemplifies and calls on us to be. To follow his North Star is to understand those four principles. Discipline hope, which is practice excellence even when the world refuses to give you a stage. Outcomes over access, stay with students, believe in them until they reach the finish line. Design matters. Systems work in the manner in which we design them. It's possible to build equity into the plumbing of the system, not just into the mission statement. Power and preservation. Honor and protect the community voices that lead. Dr. King's legacy does not ask us simply to remember him. It asks us to practice him, to also be the architects of freedom, to build freedom in one classroom, in one neighborhood, for one generation at a time. Tap the brilliance of our history, the clarity of Dr. King's vision, and educate the light forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rooks, for very informative and interesting personal stories, as well as the lessons that we can take from Dr. King's life and some of the things that occur during his time as well as today. Thank you. The Martin Luther King Celebration Committee is proud to be able to present a special video produced by our local Hidden Brookline project. Hidden Brookline is a project that has researched and identified the numbers and circumstances of people who were enslaved in Brookline, as well as efforts in Brookline to support the abolition of slavery and provide safe haven and support for people escaping slavery. Today, when there are efforts to restrict historical knowledge and limit people's understanding to the myths that support a ruling narrative, programs like Hidden Brookline are critically important to protect and spread the truth. For more information about Hidden Brookline and to learn about related talks and walking tours, visit the website for Hidden Brookline or Google it. And now, the video from Hidden Brookline. Well, that's our program tonight. I hope you've learned something. Okay, So I hope that you've learned something from the various speakers and the video that you can use, or that has made you angry, but angry enough to do something and give your, and has given you tools to actually do something about that anger. There's a lot to do. Books by Noliwe Rooks and Allison Adair are available for purchase in the lobby. This program would not be possible without the incredible support of many people. First, our committee that has worked hard and is comprised of people, all of whom are dedicated, skillful, and put together programs like this program on Martin Luther King Day and other programs throughout the year. For example, in October, we had a historian from Berklee College, Jean Theo Harris, talking about King of the North, a book of hers talking about Dr. Martin Luther King's various campaigns in the North. The program would not be possible without the support of many people. As I said, first our committee, me, Bernard Green, Jack Curtis, Rob Daves, I'm sorry, Rob. Rosalind Lowe, Robert Rogers, and Margaret Talcott. I think they're all here in the audience. Let's give them a big hand. And I should have mentioned before the applause, Caitlin Starr, the Assistant Director of our Diversity Office, that provides just incredible and valuable organizational and administrative support to the committee. We really could not. We could not succeed without her. On behalf of the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee, I want to thank the many, many other people who contributed to the success of this program. A full list is in your program, but I want to give a special set of shout-outs to the following. First, a special thank you to Equa Holmes, who offered us the beautiful collage that was used on our poster for the program. It's something you can take home and frame and add to your art collection. We may have a few copies here in the auditorium if you're lucky enough to grab one. And special thanks to the following organizations and businesses: the ASL interpreters from Boston Linguistics, right here in the front. Brookline Booksmith, the Brookline Community Foundation, Brookline, well, wait until I read all of them and then we can applaud. A big applause. Brookline Interactive Group, Brookline Public Library, who hosted a Martin Luther King Jr. display that is very, very good and very interesting, and we thank Jack Curtis of our committee for that. Collective Copies Press, who printed our poster. Coolidge Corner Theater, who offers us this beautiful auditorium for our program every year. Kristen Leader Design, who designed the poster. As you leave the auditorium, please enjoy the historical recording of Fannie Lou Hamer singing, "Go Tell It on the Mountain." Thank you, and good evening.